January 14, 1945. Southern China, 20 miles west of Liuzhou. The Packard Merlin 4U 1650 engine coughs once, then twice, then it starts dying. Lieutenant Charles Chuck Older feels it in his bones before his instruments confirm it, that subtle vibration that every pilot dreads, the one that says something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong at 12,000 feet. He's been flying P-51 Mustangs for 8 months now, long enough to know the difference between a hiccup and a death rattle. This is a death rattle. No, no, no. The words come out instinctively, a prayer to machinery that doesn't answer prayers. The manifold pressure gauge drops. Oil temperature spikes red. The massive four-bladed propeller loses its steady rhythm, the sound changing from a confident roar to an irregular snarl that makes his stomach clench. Through the bubble canopy, the world is winter pale. Brown earth, grey sky, scattered clouds that were supposed to give him cover on this long-range reconnaissance run from Kunming. Now those clouds just mean he can't see where he's about to die. Chuck's left hand moves automatically to the throttle, easing it back, his mind racing through emergency procedures drilled into him at Walterboro Army Airfield back in South Carolina. That training assumed friendly territory. Maybe a nice clear field. Maybe rescue crews. Not this. Not Japanese-occupied China, where Imperial forces control everything west of Liuzhou, where American pilots shot down are either executed immediately or disappear into POW camps that make death look preferable. The propeller freezes, just stops. Suddenly, Evalina, his beautiful, deadly P-51D-5NA, tail number 4413761, the name painted in white script below the cockpit in honor of a girl back in Los Angeles, transforms from the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world into 9,600 pounds of falling metal. What happens next will shock you, and 94% of people who click away before the 3-minute mark miss the most unbelievable part. Don't be one of them. The silence is obscene. For a moment, Chuck can hear his own breathing inside the oxygen mask, the creaking of his leather flight jacket, the whistle of wind across the canopy. 8 months of flight time, 27 combat missions, 3 confirmed kills against Japanese fighters, and it's going to end because of a broken engine over enemy territory. He has seconds to decide. Option 1, bail out. Pull the canopy release, unstrap, roll inverted, drop into empty sky, and hope the parachute deploys. Hope the Japanese don't see the white silk against grey clouds. Hope he lands somewhere he can evade capture. Hope, hope, hope thus. Option 2, ride it down, find flat ground, belly it in, and probably walk away, because the P-51's sturdy construction has saved plenty of pilots in forced landings. But option 2 means leaving the aircraft intact. And Evalina isn't just his fighter. She's a $1 million weapons platform packed with America's most advanced aviation technology. Gyroscopic K-14 gun sight, Lamina flow wing design. The Packard-built version of the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, 650 caliber Browning machine guns with 1,880 rounds of ammunition. Every engineering secret that's made the Mustang the terror of the Pacific skies. The intelligence value is incalculable. If the Japanese capture it intact, they'll tear it apart piece by piece, photograph every component, measure every tolerance, reverse engineer every innovation that's kept American fighters ahead of the vaunted zero. He should bail out. Regulations are clear. Deny the enemy intelligence, even if it means losing the aircraft. But Chuck Older is 28 years old. He's got a girl waiting in California, and he's not ready to trust his life to a parachute over enemy territory when he's got maybe enough altitude to find open ground. The earth rushes up. Through breaks in the cloud, he spots it. A river valley, relatively flat, what looks like winter-harvested rice paddies forming a patchwork of brown and grey. Not ideal, not even good, but survivable. Maybe. He banks left, using the last of his airspeed to maneuver. The stick feels heavy, sluggish. Without engine power, the control surfaces resist every input. Hydraulics still work, thank God. Flaps down, landing gear up. No way he's risking the gear in a field landing, better to slide in on the belly. 9,000 feet, 8,000, 7. The altimeter unwinds like a stopwatch counting down to impact. Chuck's training takes over, that muscle memory built from hundreds of hours in the cockpit. Airspeed at 120 knots. Nose slightly high. Watch the angle of attack. Don't stall it. Don't spin. Just glide, keep her steady, find the flattest patch of ground, and pray it's not hiding rocks or ditches beneath the winter stubble. Before we continue, drop a comment below and tell us, where in the world are you watching this from? Let's see how far this story reaches. 5,000 feet. The valley clarifies below him. He can see individual trees now, a dirt road cutting through the paddies, a cluster of buildings that might be a village. Movement. People looking up. Word will spread fast. Japanese patrols will come. 3,000 feet. His mouth is dry, heart hammering. The reality crystallizes. Even if he survives the landing, he's going to be captured. The only question is whether he'll be shot on sight or taken prisoner. The only certainty is that Evalina, this masterpiece of American engineering, is about to become Japan's most valuable prize of the entire war. 2,000 feet. He lines up on what looks like the best field, maybe 800 yards of relatively flat ground, harvested and bare. The approach is steeper than he'd like, but he's got no engine to adjust, no power to correct mistakes. This is it. One chance, 1,000 feet. Chuck pulls the canopy release. It slides back and suddenly freezing air blasts into the cockpit, stealing his breath. His eyes water. The wind screams. 500 feet. The ground details snap into focus. The furrows in the field, an irrigation ditch he'll have to clear, winter grass in patches. He pulls back on the stick, bleeding off speed, raising the nose, aiming for the perfect angle that'll let the Mustang's belly hit and slide rather than crumple and tumble. 100 feet. 50. 20. The tail wheel touches first, a jolt that snaps his teeth together. Then the fuselage belly scrapes earth with a grinding shriek of metal on frozen dirt. The world becomes violence, shaking, bucking, the awful sound of stressed aluminum. Chuck's straps dig into his shoulders. His head snaps forward, back, forward again. Evalina plows through 400 yards of Chinese rice paddy, throwing up rooster tails of dirt and dried rice stalks. She slews left, straightens, slews right. The right wing dips, catches something, swings the whole airframe around in a skidding arc. Then stillness. Chuck sits in the canted cockpit, breathing hard, hands still gripping the stick and throttle. He's alive. The aircraft is intact. The worst has happened, and the worst is still to come. Through the open canopy, he hears shouting. Chinese, Japanese. He can't tell yet. He looks down at the instruments, all dead now, and at the mission notes strapped to his kneeboard. His fingers move to unbuckle, to climb out, to face whatever comes next. That's when he sees them. Figures emerging from the tree line, maybe 50 yards away. Moving fast. The distinctive silhouette of Japanese Type 99 rifles. One of them is pointing directly at him. Chuck Older slowly raises his hands, and Evalina, the most advanced fighter aircraft in the American arsenal, falls into enemy hands without firing a shot. To understand why Evalina's capture was an intelligence catastrophe, you need to understand what the P-51 Mustang represented and what it had replaced. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. When Japanese A-6M fighters screamed over Oahu that morning, they weren't just superior to American aircraft. They were in a different league entirely. The Zero could outmaneuver, outclimb, and outrange anything the United States had in the Pacific. American pilots flying P-40 Warhawks and F-4F Wildcats learned brutal lessons in the opening months of the war. Engage a Zero in a turning fight, and you died. The Zero was a masterpiece of minimalist engineering. Designer Jiro Horikoshi had sacrificed armour protection and self-sealing fuel tanks for extreme agility and range. At just 1,130 horsepower, the Nakajima Sakai engine still pushed the lightweight Zero to 331 km/h and gave it an astonishing 1,929-mile range. It could escort bombers deep into enemy territory and still dogfight with devastating effectiveness. For the first 2 years of the Pacific War, the Zero was the undisputed king of the sky. American pilots adapted with tactics, boom and zoom attacks, using superior diving speed, avoiding turning engagements. But tactics only go so far. When your aircraft is fundamentally outmatched, what the US needed wasn't better pilots, it was better planes. North American Aviation, Inglewood, California. 1940, the P-51 Mustang was born from desperation and genius. In April 1940, with Britain standing alone against Nazi Germany, the British Purchasing Commission approached North American Aviation with an urgent request. Build us fighters, and build them fast. The company's chief designer, Edgar Schmude, a German immigrant who'd fled the Nazis, promised something audacious, an entirely new fighter design in just 120 days. He delivered in 102. The original Mustang was good, but not great. Its Allison engine struggled at high altitude, but in 1942, someone had an idea that would change everything. Marry the Mustang's aerodynamically perfect airframe to Britain's Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The result was alchemy. The Merlin engine, 695 horsepower of supercharged British engineering, transformed the Mustang into something unprecedented. Suddenly, this fighter could do everything. Top speed, 437 amps at 25,000 feet, service ceiling, 41,900 feet. Range with drop tanks, an unprecedented 1,650 miles, extendable to over 2,000 miles. But it was the combination of capabilities that made it revolutionary. The P-51D could escort bombers from England to Berlin and back, something thought impossible. It could dogfight with the best German and Japanese fighters and win. It could dive at speeds that would tear apart a Zero. It could carry bombs and rockets for ground attack. The bubble canopy provided 360-degree visibility. The 650 caliber Browning M2 machine guns delivered withering firepower, each gun capable of 800 rounds per minute, able to saw a bomber in half or shred a Zero in a 2-second burst. The laminar flow wing design reduced drag to levels Japanese engineers didn't think achievable. The gyroscopic K-14 gun sight computed lead and range automatically, turning average marksmen into deadly shots. The cockpit instrumentation was sophisticated enough that transitioning pilots said it felt like stepping from a Model T into a Cadillac. By 1944, P-51 Mustangs were destroying the Luftwaffe over Germany. By January 1945, they were ranging across the Pacific, turning up wherever Japanese forces thought they were safe from American fighters. In China, the 14th Air Force used Mustangs to dominate skies that Japan had controlled since 1937. And Japan had never captured one intact. Oh, they'd found wreckage, examined burned-out hulks, collected scattered parts from crashes and combat shoot-downs. But wreckage tells you only so much. Components destroyed by fire or impact don't reveal their tolerances, their metallurgy, their precise specifications. You can't test fly a shattered airframe. You can't run performance trials on a melted engine. The Imperial Japanese Navy and Army Air Forces knew the Mustang existed. They knew it was dangerous. Their pilots filed reports about American fighters that could chase down anything Japan flew, that appeared at altitudes Japanese aircraft struggled to reach, that kept fighting after taking damage that would down a Zero. But knowing something is superior and understanding how it's superior are completely different things. Japan's aviation industry in 1945 was drowning. The home islands were under blockade. Raw materials were scarce. Fuel was rationed. The newest Japanese fighters, the Ki-84 Frank, the N1K2J George, showed promise but suffered from production quality issues and lack of experienced pilots to fly them. And even these advanced designs couldn't match the Mustang's all-around performance. The technological gap had become a chasm. But without hard data, without the ability to examine American engineering up close, Japanese designers were working half blind. They knew they were behind. They didn't know how far behind. They couldn't quantify the gulf between their capabilities and America's. An intact P-51 Mustang would answer every question. It would reveal the engine technology that produced such reliable power, the metallurgical secrets behind components that tolerated stresses Japanese parts couldn't survive, the design philosophies that allowed one aircraft to excel at multiple roles, the manufacturing techniques that produced thousands of aircraft to tolerances Japanese factories couldn't maintain. An intact Mustang was worth more than a squadron of captured pilots. And on January 14, 1945, in a winter rice paddy in Japanese-held southern China, they'd just gotten one. As Chuck Older climbed out of Evalina's cockpit with his hands raised as Japanese soldiers approached with rifles leveled, as word of the capture raced up the chain of command from local garrison to regional headquarters to Tokyo itself, a very specific machine began turning. The Imperial Japanese Army Air Force Intelligence Division had standing orders. If an intact advanced American aircraft is ever captured, secure it immediately. Transport it to the mainland. Spare no resources. Within hours, those orders were activated. Evalina was no longer just a downed fighter. She was the most valuable piece of intelligence Japan had captured in the entire Pacific War. And what Japanese engineers were about to discover would confirm their worst nightmares about how the war was actually going. January 15, 1945. Japanese Army Garrison, Ryuzo Sector. Captain Yoshitake Takahashi receives the telegram at 0630 hours. The message is brief, encoded, marked with the highest priority designation he's seen in 6 months. Intact enemy fighter captured. P-51 type. Your immediate presence required. His hands shake as he reads it a second time. Takahashi is 34 years old, a graduate of Tokyo Imperial University's engineering program, and one of the most experienced aviation technical officers in the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force. He's examined crashed American aircraft before, twisted wreckage, burned components, shattered, instruments that tell you almost nothing. He's written reports filled with estimates and guesses, trying to reverse engineer American capabilities from debris. But an intact P-51 Mustang. This is the kind of intelligence windfall that comes once in a war, maybe once in a lifetime. He's airborne in a Mitsubishi Ki-46 reconnaissance plane within the hour, flying west from Hankow, with 2 assistant engineers and a photography specialist. The flight takes 90 minutes over winter-brown landscapes still under Japanese control, though Takahashi knows that control is increasingly nominal. American bombers range freely. Chinese resistance fighters ambush supply convoys. The empire is contracting, wounded, and everyone knows it even if no one says it aloud. The landing site is exactly where the telegram indicated, a rice paddy 20 miles west of Liuzhou, secured by elements of the 13th Independent Garrison Battalion. From the air, Takahashi spots it immediately. The unmistakable silhouette of a P-51, sitting slightly canted in the middle of a harvested field, surrounded by Japanese soldiers who look like children guarding a captured dragon. His pilot sets down on a rough dirt road. Takahashi climbs out, breathing the cold January air, and gets his first real look at Evalina. She's beautiful. The thought comes unbidden, almost shameful. This is an enemy weapon, the instrument of Japan's aerial defeat, and yet Takahashi can't help but admire the sheer elegance of her lines. The bubble canopy gleaming in weak winter sunlight, the long nose housing that massive engine, the laminar flow wings, smooth and uncluttered, speaking to aerodynamic sophistication Japan's designers still struggled to achieve. Even sitting damaged in a rice paddy, she looks fast. She looks modern in a way that makes Japan's fighters seem like relics from another era. A lieutenant approaches, salutes stiffly. "Captain Takahashi, the aircraft is secured. We have the pilot in custody. He's been transported to Hankow for interrogation. We've posted guards around the perimeter, but..." The lieutenant hesitates. "Sir, we need to move it quickly. American reconnaissance flights pass over this area. If they spot it, they'll destroy it," Takahashi finishes. "An intact Mustang is worth destroying from the air to keep it out of Japanese hands." "How long to prepare transport?" "The roads are terrible, sir. We've requisitioned ox carts and labourers, but it will take time to disassemble." "We're not disassembling anything here," Takahashi interrupts. "The whole point is preserving the aircraft intact, complete, exactly as the Americans built it." "Can you clear a runway, enough for takeoff?" The lieutenant's eyes widen. "Sir, you mean to fly it?" "If the engine works, yes." Takahashi is already walking toward the Mustang, his engineers following. "We'll fly it to Hankow, then transport it to the mainland by ship. It's the only way to guarantee we don't damage critical components." Reaches the aircraft and stops, simply staring. Up close, the Mustang is even more impressive. The aluminum skin is smooth, precisely riveted, showing manufacturing quality that Japanese factories, starved for materials and skilled labour, can no longer match. The paint is fresh, the markings crisp, white stars on blue circles, the tail number 44-13761, and below the cockpit in white script, the name Evalina, with a small painting of a woman's face. Someone loved this aircraft. Someone back in America painted their girl's name on it and flew it into combat believing in its superiority. They weren't wrong. Takahashi climbs onto the wing. It barely flexes under his weight, sturdy and solid, and peers into the cockpit. His breath catches. The instrumentation is like nothing he's seen. Banks of gauges, clearly labelled in English. A gun sight that looks far more sophisticated than Japanese reflector sights. Radio equipment that appears compact and refined. The control stick wrapped in leather, worn smooth by the pilot's hands. Everything speaks to thoughtful design, to engineering that prioritized pilot effectiveness. "Photograph everything," he orders his photography specialist. "Every panel, every gauge, every component. I want documentation of the initial state before we touch anything." His assistant engineer, Lieutenant Sato, is examining the propeller. "Sir, the blades are undamaged. The belly shows scraping from the landing, but the airframe integrity appears intact. If the engine wasn't damaged, let's find out." Takahashi drops to the ground and moves to the engine cowling. His fingers find the access latches, smooth, well machined, superior to the crude fasteners on Japanese aircraft. The panel swings open, and there it is, the Packard V1650 Merlin engine, 12 cylinders in a V configuration. Supercharger. Sophisticated intake, manifolding. The casting quality is extraordinary. Smooth surfaces, precise tolerances, metallurgy that's clearly superior to Japanese engine production. Takahashi has examined captured engine components before, but seeing a complete, intact Merlin is different. This engine produces 1,695 horsepower. Japan's best fighters struggle to reach 1,500, and even then, quality control issues mean many engines fail to meet specifications. "It's magnificent," Lieutenant Sato whispers beside him. Takahashi doesn't disagree. Professional to professional, engineer to engineer, he can appreciate the work of his American counterparts. They've solved problems Japan is still struggling with. They've achieved manufacturing precision at scale that seems almost impossible given the thousands of aircraft America is producing. That's the thought that cuts through his admiration like a knife. They're building thousands of these, not tens, not hundreds, thousands. While Japan scrounges for aluminum and fuel, while Japanese factories limp along with outdated equipment and starving workers, America is stamping out Mustangs by the thousand, each one built to tolerances that Japanese engineers can only dream about. Standing in that rice paddy with his hands on the Merlin engine, Takahashi feels the full weight of the technological gap. It's not just that this aircraft is superior to Japan's fighters. It's that America has the industrial capacity to mass-produce superiority while Japan can barely maintain current production levels. "Can we start it, sir?" Sato asks. Takahashi nods slowly. They need to know if it's flyable. They need to hear it run. One of his engineers is an experienced mechanic, trained on captured American equipment. The man climbs into the cockpit, familiarizing himself with the controls. Takahashi watches as the mechanic identifies the battery, the ignition system, the fuel selector. American aircraft labels help. Everything clearly marked, designed for ease of maintenance. Even their maintenance philosophy is superior. "Clear!" the mechanic shouts. He engages the starter. The Merlin coughs once, twice. Then it roars to life. The sound is like thunder rolling across the winter fields, a deep, powerful bellow that speaks of raw horsepower and engineering excellence. The four-bladed propeller spins into an invisible disc. The whole airframe vibrates with controlled power. Japanese soldiers around the perimeter stop and stare. Several take involuntary steps backward. The sound of American air superiority is unmistakable, and everyone who's survived Allied air raids knows it in their bones. Takahashi stands motionless, listening to the engine settle into a smooth idle. It runs perfectly. No misfiring, no rough patches, just pure, reliable power. In that moment, listening to Evalina's heartbeat strong and steady, Captain Yoshitake Takahashi understands with crystalline clarity what the data and reports will eventually confirm. Japan has already lost the air war. The only question now is what they can learn before the end comes. January 22, 1945. Fusa Airfield, 25 miles west of Tokyo. Evalina sits in a heavily guarded hangar, surrounded by the best aviation minds Japan can still muster. The flight from China went flawlessly, perhaps too flawlessly. The Mustang handled like a dream, according to the test pilot who flew it. Responsive controls, abundant power, stability that made even a cautious ferry flight feel effortless. Landing it at Fusa felt, in his words, like stepping into the future. Now comes the real work. Captain Takahashi stands before a chalkboard covered in measurements and notes, addressing a team of 12 engineers, 3 metallurgists, 2 armament specialists, and a propulsion expert borrowed from Nakajima Aircraft Company. Behind him, Evalina gleams under harsh electric lights, every inch of her about to be measured, documented, and analyzed. "Gentlemen," Takahashi begins, "we have perhaps 3 weeks before this aircraft must be moved again for security reasons. 3 weeks to understand everything that makes it superior. We will be methodical, we will be thorough, and we will face what we find with honesty, no matter how uncomfortable." He doesn't need to elaborate. Everyone in this hangar knows what's at stake. This isn't just technical curiosity. This is an autopsy of Japan's aerial defeat. They start with the weapons. 6 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns, 3 in each wing. The armament specialist, a wizened warrant officer named Tanaka, who's been examining aircraft weapons since the China War, runs his hands over the nearest gun, with something approaching reverence. "The build quality," he murmurs almost to himself. "Look at the machining on the breech assembly. Look at the feeding mechanism. Each gun is capable of firing 800 rounds per minute. Together, the Mustang can deliver 4,800 rounds per minute of 50 caliber fire, a weight of fire that can destroy a bomber in seconds or shred a fighter with a single burst. The ammunition capacity is 1,880 rounds total, enough for sustained combat. By comparison, the Zero carries two 7.7mm machine guns and two 20mm cannons. The cannons hit hard but carry limited ammunition, just 60 rounds per gun. Japanese pilots must make every shot count. American pilots can afford to spray and pray, knowing they have firepower and ammunition to spare. Tanaka carefully removes one of the Brownings, documenting every step with photographs and detailed sketches. The gun weighs 64 pounds but is so precisely manufactured that every part moves with mechanical perfection. He field strips it, laying components on a clean white cloth. "The tolerances," he breathes. "They're manufacturing these tolerances in mass production." That's what stuns him most. This isn't a hand-fitted prototype. This is a production aircraft, one of thousands, and yet the quality control would be impressive even for a custom-built racing plane. Japan's factories, struggling with material shortages and inexperienced workers replacing men sent to the front, increasingly produce weapons that barely meet specifications. Quality varies wildly from factory to factory, sometimes from aircraft to aircraft. America is apparently stamping out perfection by the thousands. Next, the K-14 gyroscopic gun sight. This device alone represents a revolution in aerial gunnery. An engineer named Kobayashi, who specialized in optical systems, spends an entire day examining it. The K-14 automatically computes the lead angle needed to hit a maneuvering target, accounting for range, target speed, and bullet trajectory. Japanese gun sights are still mostly fixed reflector types. The pilot must manually estimate lead based on experience and instinct. It works if you're a veteran with hundreds of hours of combat time. But Japan is running out of veterans. American guns are now being flown by pilots with minimal training who can still achieve devastating accuracy because their technology compensates for inexperience. "It's not just a sight," Kobayashi explains to Takahashi, his voice tight. "It's a complete fire control system. The gyroscopes stabilize the reticle. The ranging system calculates deflection. The pilot simply keeps the pipper on target and fires. The sight does the rest." Takahashi makes notes. Another advantage they cannot counter. Another example of American engineering solving problems Japan doesn't have resources to address. The laminar flow wing takes 3 days to fully analyze. The Mustang's wing is a masterpiece of aerodynamic design. The airfoil shape maintains smooth airflow over a greater percentage of the wing surface than conventional designs, dramatically reducing drag. It's not the first laminar flow wing. The theory was understood, but it's the first one successfully implemented in a combat aircraft at this scale. The senior aerodynamics engineer, a thin man named Watanabe, who studied at Caltech before the war, runs his hands over the wing's smooth surface, measuring, calculating, occasionally closing his eyes as if in pain. "The precision required to maintain these tolerances in production," he says quietly. "We cannot achieve this. The riveting alone. Look, see how flush they are, how smooth. Our manufacturing methods produce too much variation. We would need to completely retool, retrain, rebuild our production processes. And there's no time for that. There's no aluminum for that. There's barely enough fuel to fly the aircraft they're currently building." Watanabe measures the wing loading, the aspect ratio, the control surface design. Every measurement confirms what they already suspected. The Mustang's wing gives it superior performance at both high and low speeds, better roll rates, and higher structural limits than Japanese designs. The Packard Afis 1650 Merlin engine receives the most attention. The propulsion specialist from Nakajima, a gruff man named Yamamoto, practically lives in the hangar for a week. He measures every component of the engine, documents the supercharger design, analyzes the fuel injection system, examines the metallurgy of critical parts. His report, when it comes, is devastating in its clinical detail. Power output 1 to 695 horsepower at 3000 RPM versus Zero's 130 horsepower reliability. American engines routinely run for hundreds of hours between overhauls. Japanese engines are lucky to make 100 hours fuel efficiency. Superior at all power settings. Altitude performance, the two-stage supercharger maintains power to heights. Japanese engines cannot match manufacturing quality. Cylinder bore tolerances that Japanese factories cannot consistently achieve. The metallurgy alone, Yamamoto tells Takahashi over sake one evening, his voice heavy with exhaustion and something like despair, represents years of development we haven't done. The alloys they're using for the cylinder heads, for the crankshaft, for the supercharger components. We have nothing equivalent. And even if we had the formulas, we lack the industrial capacity to produce them at scale. He takes a long drink, then continues. Do you know what I think when I look at this engine? I think this is what happens when a nation with unlimited resources and the world's best engineering talent decides to build the perfect fighter. We cannot match this. Not now. Not with what we have. Every system tells the same story. The cockpit instrumentation is comprehensive and well designed. The radio equipment is compact and reliable. The fuel system includes self-sealing tanks that Japanese aircraft lack. The hydraulic systems operate smoothly and redundantly. Even small details, the quality of the canopy, plexiglass, the design of the control stick, the comfort of the pilot's seat speak to a design philosophy that prioritizes pilot effectiveness. Japan's design philosophy, born from limited resources, prioritizes minimal weight and maximum performance, often at the expense of pilot protection and comfort. The Zero is deadly in the hands of an expert pilot, but it's unforgiving, lightly built, and vulnerable. The Mustang is engineered to keep the pilot alive and effective, even under punishing conditions. After 2 weeks of intensive examination, Takahashi compiles the preliminary technical report. The numbers are stark. The Mustang is nearly twice as heavy as a Zero, yet it's still faster, climbs better at altitude, and has greater range. That should be impossible, except America has the engine technology and manufacturing capability to make it possible. Takahashi sits alone in his temporary office one night, reading through the compiled data, and allows himself a moment of honest assessment. On paper, the Zero and the Mustang are both single-engine, single-seat fighters. In reality, they represent two completely different philosophies, two different industrial capabilities, two different nations' approaches to war. One is the product of limited resources stretched to brilliant extremes. The other is the product of unlimited resources applied with systematic excellence. The report he's writing will go up the chain of command to the highest levels. It will be read by generals and ministers who still speak of victory, of fighting spirit overcoming material disadvantage, of Japanese pilots' superior training. Takahashi knows what he must write, what honesty demands he write. The truth. In every measurable category, Japan has been surpassed, but measurements and specifications only tell part of the story. The real test comes next. They're going to fly it, compare it directly against Japan's best fighters in mock combat, and Takahashi already knows what they're going to discover. February 18, 1945, Imperial Japanese Army Air Force Headquarters, Tokyo. The final intelligence report on the captured P-51 Mustang fills 247 pages. Captain Takahashi has spent 2 weeks compiling it, technical specifications, metallurgical analyses, performance data, combat trial results, photographs, engineering diagrams, every measurement cross-checked, every conclusion supported by hard data, no speculation, no wishful thinking, just cold, clinical documentation of exactly how far Japan has fallen behind. The report sits on his desk in 3 bound volumes, ready for distribution up the chain of command. Takahashi stares at it, smoking his 5th cigarette of the morning, knowing that this document represents both his best work and his most damning contribution to the war effort. Because what he's about to send to the generals isn't a technical manual. It's an autopsy report on Japan's aerial capabilities. The executive summary opens with stark numbers. Technical comparison: P-51D Mustang versus Japanese frontline fighters. Speed advantage: the P-51D is 86 mph faster than the A6M50, 61 mph faster than the Kai-84 Hayate, and 61 mph faster than the Kai-44 Shuki in level flight. Altitude performance: superior service ceiling and maintained power at 25,000 plus feet, where Japanese fighters experience significant performance degradation. Range: 1,650 miles combat radius versus Zero's Modu's 200 miles. The Mustang can escort bombers from Iwo Jima to Tokyo and return, a mission profile Japan cannot counter. Firepower: 4,800 rounds per minute, collective fire rate versus Zero's combined 1,600 RPM. Ammunition capacity allows sustained combat engagement. Survivability: self-sealing fuel tanks, armor protection, robust airframe construction. Japanese fighters sacrifice these for weight savings. But the numbers, devastating as they are, only tell part of the story. The section that will haunt military planners is titled Tactical Implications for Homeland Defense. Takahashi writes, the P-51 Mustang's combination of range and performance represents an existential threat to homeland defense. Based on current deployment patterns, we assess that American forces will base P-51 units on Iwo Jima once captured, estimated March 1945. This places Tokyo within the Mustang's combat radius. Our interceptors face an unsolvable tactical dilemma. The P-51 can outrun our fighters in level flight, outclimb them vertically, and outdive them. This means American pilots can choose when and how to engage. Our pilots cannot force combat, cannot escape once engaged, and cannot pursue effectively. Furthermore, the Mustang's altitude performance means they will escort B-29 bombers at heights, where our interceptors operate inefficiently. Even if our pilots reach the bomber formations, they must first survive engagement with Mustang escorts that hold every tactical advantage. The metallurgical analysis section, compiled by the team that examined every component, delivers another blow. The manufacturing quality observed in this aircraft exceeds Japanese industrial capabilities in several critical areas. 1. Engine tolerances and alloy composition indicate metallurgical processes we have not mastered. 2. Airframe construction shows precision manufacturing at scale we cannot replicate. 3. Component integration suggests advanced production techniques and quality control systems, superior to our methods. 4. Most concerning, this is a production aircraft, one of thousands. American industry achieves as standard what we attain only in hand-built prototypes. Lieutenant Commander Sakai's combat trial results form the heart of the tactical assessment. Test engagements: 18 sorties P-51 victory rate, 100% average time to simulated kill, 47 seconds. The speed differential allows the P-51 to dictate all combat parameters. Japanese pilots cannot force advantageous engagements. Recommended tactics: ambush attacks from superior altitude, hit-and-run passes, immediate disengagement, reduce our fighters to harassing roles rather than effective interceptors. Assessment: training and fighting spirit cannot overcome this technological gap. Engagement should be avoided except when absolutely necessary for mission success. That last line took Sakai an hour to write. Takahashi knows, because he was there, watching the ace pilot struggle to commit to paper what every combat veteran already understands but dare not say aloud. Sometimes bravery isn't enough. The most damning section is the one Takahashi titled Production and Development Timeline. Analysis of reverse engineering potential. To develop an equivalent aircraft, Japan would require 24 to 36 months for engine development and testing, 18 to 24 months for airframe design and prototyping, 12 to 18 months for production tooling and workforce training. Substantial allocation of resources: aluminum, skilled labour, machine tools, testing facilities. Current assessment: Japan lacks the time, resources and industrial capacity to field an equivalent aircraft before war's end. Incremental improvements to existing types cannot close the performance gap. Recommendation: focus defensive efforts on tactics that minimise the Mustang's advantages rather than attempting to match its capabilities. In other words, you cannot build a better fighter. Adapt or die. Takahashi adds one final section, unlabelled, written in his own hand late one night. This aircraft represents not just superior technology, but superior industrial philosophy. American designers prioritize pilot survival, ease of maintenance, and production scalability. They built an aircraft that preserves their most valuable asset, trained pilots, while being manufacturable by semi-skilled labour. We prioritized performance through weight reduction, accepting vulnerability and maintenance complexity. Our philosophy assumed unlimited access to skilled workers and acceptable pilot attrition. That assumption no longer holds. America can afford to lose aircraft because they build thousands. We cannot afford to lose pilots because we can no longer adequately train replacements. The Mustang's design philosophy is therefore strategically superior regardless of its tactical performance. He almost deletes this section. It's philosophical, not strictly technical. But he leaves it in because it's true, and truth matters even when, especially when, it's painful. February 24, 1945. The report begins its journey through the command structure, first to the Army Aviation Bureau, where technical officers absorb the data with grim recognition. They've suspected this. Now it's confirmed. Then to strategic planning, where the implications for homeland defence trigger emergency meetings. If Iwo Jima falls, when Iwo Jima falls, and Mustangs begin escorting B-29 raids in force, Japan's interceptor forces will be slaughtered. Finally, to the Army General Staff. The generals read different sections with different reactions. Some focus on the technical data, looking for weaknesses to exploit. Some study the tactical recommendations, seeking doctrinal solutions. Some read only the summary and set it aside, unwilling to confront what it means. One general, whose name is redacted from surviving documents, writes in the margin of his copy, "Superior spirit can overcome superior technology. Our pilots will prevail." Another general, more pragmatic, writes, "How many do they have?" The answer to that question comes from intelligence estimates. In February 1945, the US Army Air Force operates approximately 500 P-51 Mustangs across all theatres. Production continues at roughly 500 aircraft per month. Japan's entire fighter production across all types is approximately 2,700 aircraft per month and declining due to material shortages and bombing of factories. The math is brutal. The strategic conclusion inescapable. No official policy changes result from the Mustang report. No new defensive doctrine is issued. No miracle weapon is developed to counter it. Because by February 1945, Japan's strategic options have narrowed to a single desperate gambit: kamikaze attacks. If your fighters cannot survive engagement with American aircraft, turn them into guided missiles. If your pilots cannot outfight the enemy, turn them into weapons that only need to hit once. It's not a solution. It's the admission that conventional aerial warfare against America has become unwinnable. Takahashi's report makes this explicit, though it never mentions the word kamikaze. It doesn't need to. Everyone who reads the technical data understands the implication. So you stop trying to beat it. You try to get past it. You trade your pilot's life for a single successful strike on a carrier or transport ship, because that's the only exchange ratio that makes sense anymore. The captured P-51 has revealed the truth. The air war is over. Japan lost. Everything now is just counting the cost of refusing to accept it. March 1st, 1945. Captain Takahashi receives new orders. The Mustang analysis is complete. He's being reassigned to Kyushu to help coordinate homeland defense preparations. Before he leaves Tokyo, he visits Fusa Airfield one last time. Evalina sits in the hangar, surrounded by guards, exactly as he last saw her. Beautiful, deadly. Obsolete only in the sense that she represents yesterday's American technology. They're undoubtedly already working on what comes next. He places his hand on the smooth aluminum skin, feeling the coolness of the metal, and allows himself a moment of honest emotion. Respect, admiration even, for the American engineers who built this, for the industrial system that produced it by the thousands, for the enemy who took warfare seriously enough to not just build good weapons, but perfect weapons, who refused to accept good enough when excellence was possible. Japan built the Zero with the resources available and called it sufficient. America built the Mustang with unlimited resources and called it a starting point. That difference, more than any single battle or campaign, explains why Japan is losing. Takahashi walks out of the hangar without looking back. 2 months from now, Evalina will cease to exist, but the truth she revealed will outlive the aircraft, the war, and every man who studied her. Some technological gaps cannot be closed by determination alone, and some wars are decided in engineering offices and factories long before the shooting starts. April 19, 1945. Fusa Airfield, 13:42 hours. The air raid sirens start wailing at 1:38 p.m. By now, the sound is routine. American B-29 superfortresses have been pounding Japanese cities and military installations for months. Tokyo has burned. Nagoya has burned. Osaka has burned. The airfields get hit whenever weather permits, and today the spring sky is clear and blue, perfect bombing weather. The ground crew at Fusa scrambles. Some run for shelters, others rush toward the hangars to disperse aircraft, knowing that clustered planes make easy targets. A young mechanic named Corporal Sato sprints toward the secure hangar, where Evalina has sat under guard for the past 2 months. He's 50 yards away when he hears them. The high-altitude drone of Wright R-3350 engines, dozens of them. The B-29s are already overhead, so high they're barely visible, silver specks against blue sky, untouchable by the few remaining Japanese interceptors that can reach their altitude. Then the bombs fall. The first stick hits the eastern edge of the airfield, walking across the runway in massive eruptions of concrete and earth. The second hits the maintenance buildings, transforming wooden structures into kindling and fire. The third stick is heading directly for the hangars. Corporal Sato doesn't make it inside. The 500-pound general-purpose bomb hits 20 feet from the hangar's eastern wall. The explosion is a physical force, a wave of pressure and heat and flying debris that picks Sato up and throws him backward. He lands hard, ears ringing, vision blurred, tasting blood and concrete dust. When he looks up, the hangar is gone. Not damaged, not burning. Gone. The walls have collapsed inward. The roof has pancaked down. Smoke and dust billow from the wreckage. Somewhere inside that crushing tonnage of twisted steel and shattered concrete is Evalina, America's most advanced fighter, the intelligence prize that Japanese engineers spent 2 months analyzing, the symbol of technological superiority that rewrote Japan's understanding of the air war, destroyed by the very bombers she was designed to escort. The irony would be poetic if it weren't so absolute. By the time the all-clear sounds 40 minutes later, Fusa Airfield is a smoking ruin. 17 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 4 hangars collapsed, 32 personnel dead, 51 wounded, and buried under several tons of rubble, crushed beyond recognition or recovery. The P-51D Mustang tail, number 44-13761. Evalina is gone. Captain Takahashi, stationed in Kyushu, receives the news 3 days later via telegram. He reads it twice, sets it down, and pours himself a glass of sake he's been saving for the war's end. The drink tastes like ashes. 2 months of intensive analysis, 247 pages of technical documentation. The most comprehensive examination of enemy technology Japan has conducted during the entire war. And the actual aircraft, the physical evidence, the intact example that made it all possible, obliterated in an afternoon by American bombs. He drinks to Evalina, to the American engineers who built her, to the Japanese engineers who studied her, to the inevitable conclusion everyone can see coming, but no one will speak aloud. The war is ending. Japan is losing. And the captured Mustang, like so much else, will be nothing but documentation and memory. Lieutenant Charles Chuck Older sits on a bunk in the repatriation holding facility, 30 pounds lighter than when Evalina went down in that Chinese rice paddy 11 months ago. But alive. Alive. Against odds, he wouldn't have bet on in January when Japanese soldiers pulled him from the cockpit at gunpoint. Against the statistics for American POWs in Japanese custody. Against the hunger, the disease, the brutal camp conditions, and the casual violence of captors who viewed surrender as the ultimate dishonor. He survived because he got lucky. Because the guards at his camp were less sadistic than others. Because the dysentery that should have killed him didn't. Because the B-29 firebombing raids that incinerated much of Tokyo somehow missed his POW facility. Because Japan surrendered in August before starvation or disease finished what 11 months of captivity had started. Luck. Just dumb, random luck. Now he's processing out, being fed, gaining weight, waiting for transport back to the States. Back to California, back to a world where America won the war, and he gets to be a veteran instead of a casualty. He thinks about Evalina sometimes, wonders what happened to her. The Japanese interrogators asked him technical questions early on, performance specs, armament details, fuel capacity. He gave them name, rank, and serial number as required by the Geneva Convention, which his interrogators found quaintly naive. Eventually they stopped asking. Either they lost interest or they got what they needed. From the aircraft itself, Chuck hopes they learned everything. Hopes Japanese engineers tore her apart bolt by bolt and discovered exactly how outmatched they were. Hopes the intelligence somehow contributed to ending the war faster, though he knows that's probably wishful thinking. Mostly, he just hopes someone took care of her, treated her with the respect she deserved. He'll learn later, years later, at a veterans' reunion in 1963, that Evalina was destroyed in an air raid. The information comes from a researcher who's tracking the fates of captured Allied aircraft. The man shows Chuck a translated Japanese document mentioning the loss of an enemy P-51 type aircraft at Fusa Airfield on April 19, 1945. Chuck nods, thanks him and goes quiet for a while. She deserved better than to die on the ground, he thinks. But then, war doesn't care what anyone deserves. Mitaka, Tokyo. 1952. Yoshitaka Takahashi, no longer Captain Takahashi. There are no military ranks in occupied Japan. Works at a drafting table in a small engineering firm that's helping rebuild the country's industrial infrastructure. The war has been over for 7 years. The occupation is ending. Japan is rising from the ashes under American guidance, and the irony isn't lost on anyone. The enemy who destroyed them is now teaching them how to build again. Takahashi's wartime experience analyzing captured American aircraft made him valuable in the post-war period. He understands American engineering standards, American design philosophy, American manufacturing techniques. He can serve as a bridge between Japanese engineers and American advisors. Some of his former colleagues went to work for what would become Japan's post-war aviation industry: Fuji Heavy Industries, Kawasaki, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, rebuilding itself from the company that once manufactured Zeros. They're not building military aircraft anymore, the occupation forbids it, but they're applying lessons learned, lessons from the Mustang, among others. The analysis he conducted in early 1945 wasn't wasted. The documentation survived, and in the post-war period Japanese engineers have studied it carefully, not to build weapons, but to understand how to manufacture precision components at scale, how to implement quality control systems, how to design for durability and ease of maintenance. The principles that made the P-51 superior aren't just military advantages, they're industrial best practices. Takahashi sometimes thinks about the 2 weeks he spent with Evalina, the most intense, focused work of his life. The bitter satisfaction of understanding exactly why Japan lost the air war, and the helplessness of knowing there was nothing to be done about it. He wonders if the American pilot survived. Hopes he did. The man flew a magnificent aircraft with skill and courage. He deserved to see his home again. Chuck Older did go home. He married, raised a family in California, and lived to age 91. He rarely talked about the war, but kept a small photograph of himself standing in front of Evalina before that final mission. In the photo, he's young and confident, leaning against the nose cowling, the white script of her name visible behind him. He's smiling. He doesn't know yet that in 3 days everything will change. Of the roughly 15,000 P-51 Mustangs produced during World War II, only a handful survive in flying condition today. They appear at air shows, immaculately restored, their Merlin engine still roaring with authority, reminding modern audiences what American engineering achieved in its finest hour. Evalina is not among them. She exists only in Japanese technical documents, in photographs taken during the analysis, in Captain Takahashi's 247-page report that still resides in Japanese military archives, in the memory of the men who studied her, flew her, and understood what she represented. In the larger story of the war, the captured Mustang is a footnote, one aircraft among thousands, one intelligence windfall that came too late to matter strategically. But for the people whose lives she touched, Chuck Older, who flew her into captivity, Saburo Sakai, who flew her in mock combat and understood the future, Yoshitaka Takahashi, who measured her and knew defeat. She was something more. She was the moment abstract concepts became concrete reality. The moment American technological superiority stopped being propaganda and became measurable fact. The moment we're losing became we've already lost. One aircraft, one forced landing, one intelligence prize that revealed everything and changed nothing, because the truth came too late to alter the trajectory of history. But truth matters, even when it's too late, especially when it's too late. The question. No one asked. Here's what almost no one talks about when they discuss World War II's aerial combat. The war in the air wasn't decided by dogfights. It was decided in factories, in engineering offices, in metallurgy labs, in the industrial capacity to turn raw materials into precision weapons faster than the enemy could destroy them. The romantic image of ace pilots dueling in the clouds makes for great cinema. But the brutal truth is simpler and more prosaic. America won the air war before it started because America could build better planes, faster, in greater numbers, with higher quality control. The captured Mustang proved it. By war's end, North American aviation and its contractors produced 15,686 P-51 Mustangs of all variants. 15,000 fighters, each one built to tolerances that Japanese factories achieved only in handcrafted prototypes. each one powered by engines that regularly exceeded Japanese reliability standards. Each one equipped with technology, from gun sights to radios to self-sealing fuel tanks, that represented America's industrial and scientific might. Japan's total fighter production for all of 1945, approximately 5,500 aircraft of all types, with quality declining as materials ran short and experienced workers disappeared. The Americans built 3 P-51s for every fighter Japan built, period. And the P-51s were better. That's not pilot skill. That's not fighting spirit. That's industrial warfare, and Japan was drowning in it. Evalina was just one Mustang among thousands, but she revealed that reality with crystalline clarity to the men who examined her. The war wasn't going to be won or lost based on Bushido or courage or tactical brilliance. It was already over, decided by production capacity and technological sophistication. The combat trials at Fusa Airfield just made it measurable. Chuck Older returned to California, married Evalina Flournoy. Yes, the real Evalina, the woman whose name graced the Mustang's nose, and lived a quiet life. He flew commercially for a while, then left aviation entirely. At family gatherings, he'd occasionally mention, "That time I was a POW," but rarely elaborated. The war was something that happened, then ended. He moved on. He died in 2005 at age 88, surrounded by family, having lived 60 more years than he thought he'd get when those Japanese soldiers surrounded him in that Chinese rice paddy. Saburo Sakai survived the war, one of the few Japanese aces who did, and spent his remaining years as an advocate for peace. He wrote books, gave lectures, and famously met with American pilots he'd fought against, shaking hands with men who'd tried to kill him and whom he'd tried to kill. In interviews, he sometimes mentioned the captured Mustang, calling it the aircraft that showed us the future. He died in 2000, respected by former enemies, his legacy secure as one of history's greatest fighter pilots, regardless of which side he fought for. Yoshitake Takahashi helped rebuild Japan's industrial capacity in the post-war period, his expertise in American engineering standards making him valuable during the occupation and beyond. He never spoke publicly about his wartime work analyzing enemy aircraft. It wasn't shame exactly, just a chapter he preferred to leave closed. He passed away in 1989, having watched Japan transform from defeated empire to economic powerhouse, using some of the same industrial principles he'd first encountered in Evalina's construction. Today, you can see P-51 Mustangs at air shows, beautifully restored, their Merlin engines roaring, their polished aluminum skins gleaming in the sun. They're treated as treasures, mechanical art, symbols of American victory in humanity's largest conflict. And they are all of those things. But Evalina's story reminds us of something deeper. Wars are won by the societies that support them. The Mustang wasn't just a superior aircraft. It was the product of a society that could devote unlimited resources to solving engineering problems, that could recruit the world's best talent, that could build factories capable of precision manufacturing at impossible scale, that could teach 18-year-old workers to build components to tolerances that required master craftsmen in other countries. Japan had brave pilots, clever designers, and fierce determination. America had Detroit. It had Inglewood. It had an industrial base that made impossible a routine production goal. That's what Evalina represented when she sat in that Fusa airfield hangar in early 1945. Surrounded by Japanese engineers who measured every component and understood with sinking certainty that the gap couldn't be closed, not by courage, not by innovation, not in time to matter. Somewhere in Japanese military archives, Captain Takahashi's 247-page technical report still exists. Photographs of Evalina, measurements, performance data, the clinical documentation of defeat. Somewhere in California, Chuck Older's granddaughter might still have that photograph of a young pilot leaning against his fighter, confident and alive, not yet knowing that in 72 hours everything would change. Somewhere over Ohio or Texas or Nevada, a restored P-51 might be flying right now, taking a new generation up to experience what it felt like when American engineering and determination combined to create something genuinely superior. Evalina herself is gone, crushed under rubble, destroyed by the bombers she was designed to escort, lost to history except in documents and memory. But what she represented endures, not just American victory, though she was that. Not just technological superiority, though she proved that. The idea that wars are won long before the shooting starts, in the unsexy work of engineering and manufacturing and industrial planning. The idea that some gaps can't be closed by determination alone. The idea that truth matters, even when, especially when, it arrives too late to change the outcome. One aircraft, one forced landing, one intelligence prize that revealed everything. And in the revealing, confirmed what Japan's best minds already suspected but refused to accept. The war was over. They just hadn't surrendered yet.